The one-time COVID epicenter of New York City taking a big step toward normal. Would you let your kid trade stocks before they can drive? We'll tell you about Fidelity's new service. And the NBA postseason is here. Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Wednesday, May 19th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
I'm already sweating over here in my, it's going to be 80 degrees in New York City today. Remember last week on Friday, you were like, we've got a couple weeks until summer. You were off by a week. It's already time.
I think, though, that it's going to get cool again, right? I mean, this is just going to be for a day or two, I think. I hope you're right. I get so uncomfortable when it gets hot. By the way, we are having some issues with our Apple feed. If you're listening to this on, well, you're probably not listening to this if you're listening Anyone
on Apple.
Anyone who needs to hear this isn't hearing it because they would listen on Apple.
Right, exactly. Totally meaningless. Anyway, there's some sort of issue with the Apple like RSS feed. So the podcast hasn't been showing up regularly there. So we don't know what the problem is, but we're looking into it. You're not crazy. It's something with their systems. I don't know why this is so difficult. Why there's these problems every once in a while. It seems like it should just be automatic. But anyway, we're working on it.
And a few other people wrote in yesterday commiserating that Spotify's new interface for podcasts is just so confusing.
Yeah.
I actually tweeted it, and Spotify replied and was like, okay,
really?
thanks for the feedback. We'll look into it. It's like, no, don't look into it. Just go back to what you used to have.
Yes, exactly. It's very simple.
All right, to the news here. New York, the one-time epicenter of the pandemic, taking its biggest step toward normalcy today when many COVID restrictions are dropped statewide. The CDC says more than 600,000 kids aged 12 to 15 have received their first dose of the Pfizer vaccine in just the first few days since it became available. And that is a pretty good number, given that the CDC only greenlit this last Thursday. Meanwhile, just a reminder that even though we are in the end game here, this virus is still raging in some parts of the world. India recorded the single highest daily death toll of any country so far, 4,529, although the real number probably a whole lot higher than that.
Yeah. Almost certainly. Canada set to catch up and even surpass the U.S. Probably in the next couple days in terms of percentage of their people with at least one dose of the vaccine, because they're doing what you and I had been talking about a while ago, which is like they're just giving out first doses, like just come and get it and then we'll figure out the second dose later. It appears like that's working. So even though only 4% of the Canadian population is fully vaccinated, the numbers are starting to really exponentially drop there. So I think it shows you that is a strategy that can work. Meanwhile, over here in Ohio, we're talking about their lottery campaign. Another thing that's working, Ohio health officials saying that they got their highest vaccine day in 3 weeks after they announced their $1 million lottery campaign to encourage vaccination. So, money talks, right? Money is an incentive, as it turns out. And I also thought that I made a note just to mention this because I thought that this was a pretty interesting survey from the Kaiser Family Foundation. So they did a poll in April finding that 64% of Latino adults who had not been vaccinated said that they hadn't been vaccinated because they were worried that the side effects would keep them from work. That number was 55% for Black adults, and white adults it was 41%. So to me, that speaks to the need for, I don't even know how you would do this, but some sort of like federally mandated paid time off for working people. Jill, you and I, our company basically said, like, if you got to go get vaccinated, like you can take a few hours off. If you need a day off, like it's not hard to get. But that's not the case if you're a line cook at McDonald's, right? Or if you're just any of the millions of people who have sort of shift jobs that they can't just easily get time off for. So I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure how you would mandate that, but it's pretty clear that there's a significant segment of the population that would happily get vaccinated against COVID if they could just be assured that their jobs wouldn't suffer from it.
There's also this new, I don't know, I'm seeing it with just anecdotally, two of my friends, and my casual friends have messaged, either put on social media or responded to a post that I put on social media, spreading this idea of the shedding, that idea, remember we talked about that Florida school where they were saying that if any teacher who was vaccinated wouldn't you couldn't work there if you were vaccinated because you could potentially shed the virus and cause harm to other people.
Right.
So I had posted something about India, which is in rough shape, but it appears, the good news about India is that it appears that they're sort of flattening the curve. They're flattening it at this crazy high level, but perhaps the worst is over in terms of just how many people are getting COVID on a daily basis. And my friends sent me this article about how their spike in COVID cases started when they were rolling out the vaccine. And she was like, coincidence?
God.
I'm like, no, I mean, they didn't roll out the vaccine in any way they didn't do a mass vaccination. They weren't able to reach all of the people. Like, no, there's no correlation at all.
There's no
the only correlation is just that they weren't able to vaccinate enough people, how we did to really prevent the fourth wave. But I can't believe this is still out there. Like, I don't understand how this is. If you don't want to get the vaccine because for whatever reason, because of time off, or you don't feel like it's been tested enough, but if you really think that getting the vaccine means that you're going to be shedding the virus to expose others, I mean, that is a failure of social media's part. That is just that is such misinformation.
Yeah, very well said. God, that's depressing. I did not. This is why I try and stay off of all social media at this point. It's like, I think people are losing their minds, truly. I think that we're in like a mass psychosis event in this country. I think that social media is really driving people crazy.
It is, and we're going to talk a little bit about social media, I know, later in this podcast. So I have some thoughts on being a parent on social media. All right, Carl, let's talk a little politics now. Congressional Republicans coming together to oppose a 9/11-style independent commission to investigate the January 6th Capitol riot. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has come out against it, saying he would only support the commission if it also included unrelated political violence by leftist groups like BLM and Antifa. His lieutenant's also telling rank-and-file lawmakers to vote no.
Over in the Senate, Mitch McConnell had said that he's okay with this commission pending the fine print. Now he says he's, quote, pushing pause on the legislation. So it will probably pass the House and then not pass the Senate, if I had to bet. I mean, this, I know that I've said this before and it's getting very tiring, but the speed at the revisionist history on this is just so remarkable. Like, this was just a few months ago. The deadliest attack on the Capitol building in hundreds of years. And half of our elected representatives just want to pretend like it never happened. No big deal. I mean, wouldn't you want to know more about that? Like how it went down, why it went down, how we can make sure that kind of thing never happens again? It's just mind-blowing.
The revisionist history is incredible. Former President Trump has come out and saying what happened on TV, it wasn't as bad as what it looked like on TV. The police officers were hugging the rioters.
Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
CNN also reporting that the New York Attorney General has gone from a civil probe of the Trump Organization to a criminal probe, and the state is now working alongside the Manhattan DA in its investigation into the Trump family business.
Trump also facing a criminal investigation in Georgia over his attempts to overturn the election results there. That's going to be the one that I'm really keeping an eye on. I don't know what the New York thing will. They'll probably. My guess is they're going to nail somebody on some sort of tax evasion thing. But I think that whether he can be prosecuted in Georgia for actually trying to overturn the election, to me is much more relevant to sort of the state of the country.
Andrew Giuliani. Former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's son, said that he's going to be running for governor in New York. If you think back, I maybe am aging myself, but the biggest memory I have of Andrew Giuliani is do you remember when he was behind his dad on the podium and he was making faces, and then Chris Farley on SNL did a skit?
Oh yeah, yep.
I highly suggest just Googling this.
We are really dating ourselves there, Jill. But yes, I do remember that.
But it was very relatable. If you had a kid, you were kind of I get it, and it made Rudy Giuliani a little bit more relatable. It was one of these things, but if you're where do I know this guy from? Think back a few decades. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in the Middle East right now. There are growing international calls for a ceasefire, but yet still no sign of an end to the conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli military saying it is expanding its airstrike campaign in the Gaza Strip as Hamas continues to fire rockets into Israel. President Biden is said to be privately encouraging Israel to wind down its bombardment, even as the U.S. is repeatedly blocking what would have been a unanimous statement from the UN Security Council condemning the war. According to the AP, part of the reason they're blocking it is because it has no mention of Hamas. So that's one of the reasons that they're blocking that statement.
Not like I mean, the UN Security Council is basically a useless organization, as is, much of the UN, sadly. Anytime you read, the only thing I was going to say on this is, like, anytime you read reporting that's like XYZ is quietly doing something behind the scenes that goes against what they've been saying publicly, in this case, XYZ being the White House, really what I always think of is that's that person or party, the XYZ party, in this case the White House, just doing damage control because they know that their public position is outside of sort of like the mainstream public opinion, which goes to your point the other day, Jill, about what you were saying about how Israel is sort of losing the PR campaign in the United States, which I thought was a very relevant point that you made, and that's sort of I see Biden sort of reacting to that here.
On to some business news. Customers clearly want to get out and shop. That is how Walmart CEO Doug McMillon accounted for the company's blowout earnings report. The world's largest retailer. Yes, by the way, Walmart is still the world's largest retailer, even though Amazon catching up. Same-store sales rose by about 6% in the quarter. Home Depot's same-store sales up 31%. Macy's sales up 63% year over year. And we're going to get Lowe's and Target. Macy's was, I think, the big surprise there.
Wow. Unbelievable. I actually bought something from Macy's online. I bought a garbage can from Macy's. I think that was probably the first time I've shopped at Macy's in I don't know, maybe my life.
And Macy's also owns Bloomingdale's, too. So that's included in their earnings.
Oh, Bloomies. It's been a while since I've been over to Bloomies. Maybe I'll go treat myself to something over there one of these days. What was I going to say?
I don't know.
Oh, so yeah, we're talking about retail earnings. Yes, these really showing that the U.S. consumers are shopping like it's going out of style now as the pandemic fades, which makes sense. Everybody's got money in their pockets to burn, or at least a lot of people do. For the first time in history, at least going back to 1992, retail sales exceeded inventories in April. That's really interesting and important. It basically means that these companies would be doing even better if they could keep their shelves stocked. Right? They just can't. There's so many shortages that people can't even get what they want to spend money on. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. That is a classic recipe for inflation. So, again, Powell has said that it's transitory. We shall see. And just on the wood beat, I know you make fun of me, but I keep up on the lumber futures. They've been falling off a cliff these last few days. So my parents might finally get that new siding after all, if they can actually find any wood, which is.
Do you know why?
I don't know. I think it was probably just like overbought. Like correcting.
Great analysis.
I don't. What do you pay me for?
Meanwhile, Fidelity is going to start offering its brokerage services to teenagers as young as 13, provided that their parents are customers and give consent. So this teen-friendly investing and savings accounts, they come with a debit card and the ability to buy and sell stocks, mutual funds, and ETFs without fees. Online brokerages like Fidelity and Robinhood have seen a surge in interest from young investors stuck at home during the pandemic.
I'm not really sure how this is. Do you remember custodial accounts? That was like a thing when we were growing up. I don't know if they still exist, where you can kind of like, I don't really know how they work, but I think that you can basically trade using your parents' money. I guess that's why this is different, because it's like your own money. So look, it's tricky, right? Because on the one hand, financial literacy is so desperately needed in America. I mean, I don't know about you, I didn't learn anything related to the market or investing or even really business until college, even barely then. And I'm a product of the public school system, but I didn't learn about any of this stuff. So it's good. I think it's good to have kids sort of learning how to, the stock market is a great creator of wealth in America. On the other hand, though, do you really want your 13-year-old buying puts on Tesla before dinner? I don't know. I have a feeling that a lot of my feelings on these sorts of things are going to solidify and calcify once I become a parent. And on that note, I don't know if we talked about this, Facebook's attempts to launch an Instagram for kids. I don't know if they're still trying to do this, but they floated this idea a couple months ago, an Instagram specifically for children as young as 13, I believe, maybe even younger. That just when that happened, I was almost like in a rage. I mean, it's like there's all of these clinical studies now showing this actual correlation between excessive social media use and suicide in teenagers. It's really it's like a serious problem. It's undeniable, right? And now we're trying to get them hooked even earlier. I mean, are you kidding me? We should be boycotting Facebook just for floating that idea. I'm not sure how I ended up talking about Facebook. We were talking about the stock market. I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent there, but it's sort of the same thing though, right? It's like these products for adults slowly getting more teenagers into them. I don't know.
I think the idea of teaching teens and kids about finances, just budgets and stuff, I think that's really important. I mean, you could argue more important than learning calculus or whatever else.
No question.
Just how do you do a budget? We talk about the student debt crisis right now in this country. Well, we don't even talk that much about it, but there is a huge student debt crisis in this country. Think about how many kids really 17, 18 years old, who probably sign these loans not really understanding how much money this is, what interest means, how it accrues over time. It's just, it's a lot. And I think that the earlier that we can teach kids about money and credit scores and all of that stuff that actually matters, I think that that's huge. In terms of stocks, I mean, look, I don't know how it's all in the details, right? So it depends how it's implemented. Robinhood makes it like a game, right? They gamify it, and that's been one of the biggest criticisms. As long as it's done in a responsible manner. We've interviewed the CEO of Stash. It's another investment app where they purposely make it difficult to day trade. Like that's the idea is to do these longer term investments. So it's all how you implement it. But just theoretically, just on face value, I don't have a problem with teens learning about stocks and getting involved with the markets. And fewer people right now in this country work for unions and collect pensions. So many people's retirement is tied to the markets. And so it's true. This is a way to gain long-term wealth. Onto the idea of just Instagram for kids. I'm so against it. I think there's many facets of it. Part of it, of course, is this idea of like you're just on social media and you're comparing yourself to other people and it leads to depression. The other part of it is just the not experiencing life because all you're doing is trying to take pictures of what you're doing. And so it's like for all these kids to have a phone, when you think about what it would take to post something on social media, you need your phone, you need to take the picture, you need to upload it, you need to put whatever caption you want. You're not living at that point. You're basically just, it's more time that you're spending on a screen. You're not out enjoying the ice cream man or like you're posing with the ice cream man instead of getting excited that the ice cream man's coming down the street and that you can have some ice cream. The other thing, one point that I want to make about parenting and social media, I really feel that parents, especially women and new moms, that we do ourselves a disservice by posting these glamorized photos of especially early parenthood with the captions of like, my perfect baby, I wasn't complete. I mean, and all these emotions are real. I wasn't complete until this moment, or like, this is, I don't know. I had a really hard time when my daughter was first born, and I did suffer from some postpartum depression, as do a lot of women. I think that when all we do is present these idealized pictures of like what our life is like as new parents, it gets harder to say, okay, we need longer maternity leave. We need more help for parents. We need childcare because everything looks great. If you don't have a kid and you don't know how hard it is, and all you see is your friend with like her glamorous life posting pictures of being a young parent and of her kids, you would think everything's great. Why can't she come to work 2 months after she had her baby or whatnot? So I just think that we have to rethink what we're doing on social media. I don't know. I found social media when I was when I first had my daughter, it made me feel worse every time I went on. I felt like a failure as a parent because I'm like, this person had a baby right around when I did, and she looks great. She lost all of her baby weight, and her baby's already crawling, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's could be a little toxic. And I think, again, societally, I think if we don't portray what it's actually like in that so-called fourth trimester, that those few weeks right after you have your baby, then legislation's not going to follow, and more time off for parents is not going to follow. So that's my rant.
No, I think that, yeah, totally. I mean, I completely agree.
Whew, okay. Yeah, I had none of that written down. So
We were talking about fidelity, and now this is, yeah, okay. Well, that's how it works.
Okay, the NBA postseason is here. Jason Tatum scoring 50 points to lead the Boston Celtics to a win over the Washington Wizards in the first night of the NBA play-in tournament. The Wizards will play the Pacers tomorrow in an elimination game after Indiana blew out Charlotte in the other play-in game last night. So Boston's going to be playing Brooklyn in the first round. Over in the West, the slumping defending champion Lakers bracing for Steph Curry and the Warriors tonight.
This play-in tournament idea, which is something they're relatively new. They tried it last year after during the bubble, and they liked it, so they're doing it again. LeBron and other players have come out saying it's a bad idea. It's relatively controversial, but it's overall a great thing for the league because it keeps teams from tanking. One of the NBA's big problems has been that none of these players, a lot of these players, I should say, they don't really try that hard until the playoffs or until the end of the season. So you get some really mediocre games during the regular season at best. Sometimes some teams actively try to lose games so that they can get better picks, which is a problem across many sports. But anyway, yeah, so I think the play-in tournament's great. Basketball's back in New York City. The Brooklyn Nets, 2 seed in the playoffs. Knicks, the 4 seed. Capacity restrictions going to start to be lifted at the arenas here. It's just going to be fantastic these next couple months of NBA playoffs. By the way, if anybody has tickets and they need a +1, I am fully vaxxed and I am available. I probably got 2 weeks until this baby comes.
I was going to say, you are going to be a good time, right? Like, I feel like you have 2 weeks. You'll be the life of the party for those 2 weeks.
Yes, exactly.
The global box office getting its first real post-COVID shot of adrenaline in the coming days when the latest Fast and Furious installment hits theaters before it opens in the U.S. in late June. F9 expected to bring in at least $150 million from Russia, the Middle East, and China this week.
This is the 9th film in the Fast and the Furious franchise, sitting at 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, making it just barely fresh. But I was reading some of the critical reviews, and they were basically all in agreement that it's just absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But you know what? That's maybe exactly what audiences needed after. I mean, when you just look at sort of like the Oscar movies last year, they were so just dour and depressing. I know we talked about it, right? And there hasn't been much in the way of these sort of like big budget non-superhero action movies. So I think this movie is going to absolutely be just huge when it drops. I've been trying to decide what my triumphant return to theaters will be, and I'm really running out of time here. So maybe I'll try. I won't be able to see this because it doesn't come out here for another month. And by then I'm going to be a new parent. And word on the street is that new parents don't get a lot of time to go to the movies, right?
I will tell you, I feel like we talk about your life as if it's over once you have your baby. Yeah. You'll be able, life goes on, okay? Especially early on, it's a big adjustment, but for the most part in that first time, they sleep a lot. Like, you actually will have time, so you probably won't have time to go to the theater, but you'll be able to watch stuff.
It's funny you say that, right? Because it's like it's really one of these interesting dichotomies. Because I feel like for women, when they become mothers, like you basically become a mom when you're pregnant, right? So like your life changes in a major way as soon as you get that test back. But for the man, it doesn't really change at all until the baby actually comes, right? So it's like the woman the mother is already sort of at one place, and the father is like sort of behind. I'm not being very. I'm not making a lot of sense here, but it's just something that I've been thinking about in these ways, right? Like Becky's in a different place than I am.
I've heard from men that some men it takes a little bit longer to bond with the baby, than it does, and that's one of the issues actually with maternity leave being longer than paternity leave, is that the woman bonds with the baby quicker. And just becomes a lot more comfortable with their child and doing everything, and it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if the mom is more comfortable changing the diaper and doing everything that needs to be done, they're gonna just do it, right? And then the father will maybe take a little bit more of a step back, and so that's why you need you need leave for both the mom and the dad, and that it doesn't just help the dad, that helps the mom because then they have more help. Anyway,
the best advice I've gotten in this process so far is a friend of mine said, your job in the beginning is to just support Becky. Like that's, you're basically irrelevant to the baby in the very beginning. Like your job is basically as this like support structure for Becky
no.
and your family.
Yes and no. The best advice I got from actually a Cheddar mom, Peyton, who said to me, you can't F it up. Like you're not gonna F it, just keep the baby alive, give it love. That's it. You're fine. Like that's all you need to do. They don't need to be reading at 3 months old. Like just keep the baby alive, make sure it's fed, it sleeps, it poops, and just the rest is gravy.
Oh, Joe, we turned into a parenting pod today.
Yes,
Sorry
I know.
about that, folks.
Sorry about that. Okay, that is what you need to know for Wednesday, May 19th.